Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Coffee and UFOs. If you want to see the video version of this interview, just go to youtube.com/paranormalpop. Just go to the Paranormal Pop YouTube page, like, subscribe, comment down below, and you can see us in live action. Of course, you have this audio version right here and now. You can take any time, space, dimension, or wherever. Thank you again for all of your support, whether it's on Paranormal Now or on Coffee and UFOs. And I do have a question for you as well. Have you seen a UFO? If so, please comment down below, whether it's on the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, or wherever you listen to this podcast, and just type UFO. And of course, if you want to share that experience with us, I'd love to hear that as well. All right, enjoy this episode with my good friend, Ken Cherry.
That's the only thing substantial I've taken out of a casino in years is this Yeti insulated coffee mug.
This one we got from Taos. It's a handmade. Any last words before we start?
That sounds ominous. Hopefully we'll have a better conversation than that.
I hope so.
All right.
But for me, as long as I have my coffee and we're talking UFOs,
there you go.
Nothing can go wrong. All right. So welcome back to another edition of Coffee and UFOs. My guest is Ken Cherry, and he is the author of Marc, Slade Investigates the Stephenville UFO and former Texas MUFON director. Ken, are you caffeinated and ready to go?
I'm ready to go, yes.
All right.
Caffeinated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect everyone to be up to my level, but, you know.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're going to start straight away with our standard list of questions. Have you seen a UFO?
Yes, I have.
And what was your experience?
Okay, you're not going to give me yes or no questions all the way through. Well, I mentioned it in my book, and I was about 7, and we lived on a ranch. I was a little kid. I was out walking around through the woods and came out to a clearing. I looked up, and there was this silvery object going across the horizon. The next thing I know, this aircraft came zooming down at this silvery object. And I don't know if it's a flash of light or what, but there seemed to be something flash between the two crafts. And the next thing I know, a pilot, a man jumps out of this plane, he shoots out of it straight up, and then comes down in a parachute. The plane started on billowing smoke, and crashed in the ground. And the silvery object just shot off. Mm-hmm. Of course, I was 7, so I didn't know anything about aircraft. We lived pretty much in rural areas, and I'd never been around airplanes. But, I learned later that this was, in 1952, they still had this a directive to military pilots to force down UFOs, and this was a classic flying saucer that I had seen.
So you think that was part of the directive?
Yes, and it didn't work out well. There was a General Chidlaw that gave an interview to, I believe it was Time magazine back in 53 or so. He was over the entire U.S. Air Command, said that at one point we were losing a plane a day someplace around the world trying to force down UFOs.
That's crazy. That's a lot.
Yeah, it never worked in our favor. So eventually they reversed the order.
Yeah. So this
that it left a very lasting, obviously, impression on me. It was
right.
One of the couple of events in my life that, aside from the Kennedy assassination, that will always be burned in my memory.
Well, I was talking to Kevin D. Randall recently, and I mentioned that I think that when you have a traumatic experience or dramatic experience, you tend to remember things better for a long period of time, and especially details. And he was kind of arguing that, saying the science doesn't really support it, but anytime I've had an extraordinarily intense or shocking experience, I remember that more clearly than any other day-to-day experience of my life. I mean, it just, that the memory, it's like seared in your brain.
It is. And another instance I had was we lived next to a very busy boulevard once when I was a kid, and I saw these two cars. There was heavy traffic, but for some reason my eyes focused on two cars that one of them changed lanes and they just hit head on. But as I was watching it, it was almost like it was in slow motion. These two cars coming together, crashing head to head, and then kind of bouncing up in the air and then back down.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, it's just as clear to me as it was then when I was 10, 11 years old. So,
yeah, the slow motion effect. I think most people experience that in intense situations.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. Have you seen a cryptid or a ghost?
Well, I had a very personal experience that I think would be good to share with people. It was a paranormal experience, and it'd take just a bit to get into. But when I was a young Marine, I was attending avionics classes in Jacksonville, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was pregnant. She was away from Texas and away from home and friends. For the first time, I was pregnant. She was very depressed a lot of the time. One evening, we went to bed, and she was facing the wall over on one side of the bed, and I was facing toward her, but close to the edge of the bed on my side.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite late, and I felt the presence sit down on the bed behind my back, and that my heart began to race, and it's just like a cold sweat. And I heard a voice in my head, just as clear as a bell, say, "Cleave to thy wife." And, I'd probably never been in a church more than 3 times in my life as a little kid.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really sure of the meaning of cleave at that moment, but I scooched across the bed and put my arm around my wife, who was about 5 months pregnant or so, maybe 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt her immediately relax, like the stress left her body. And I didn't share that story with my wife until years later. And she said, "Well, I never confided in you either, but several times I felt like I was going to lose our child." And she said, "One day I was feeling, that I was losing the baby, and I laid down on the bed, and she said her presence appeared at the end of the bed, and suddenly I just felt calm and relaxed, and the baby stopped kicking." And of course, it would have been far premature to have been born.
Yeah.
And so she said, "I don't know if it was an angel or Jesus Christ or whatever, but obviously it was some benign, loving force that was concerned about us 2 ordinary young people and our child." And of course, my daughter is now 52 years old, but she would have been lost had it not been for this. And so you can say, yeah, it had a profound effect on my life.
Yeah. And it's a wonder why these things happen when they do.
And to us, we were just ordinary young people, right, with an ordinary pregnancy.
Right. Why you at that time and not someone else at a different time?
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of the mystery of all this, that we just keep kind of, reaching blindly through the dark to try to get some answers. But speaking of heavenly, you look like a godly figure with the light behind your head right now, casting a halo around you.
That's my guardian angel. Don't mess around.
But it's good lighting. Good lighting.
All right. Quite unintentional.
Right. But yeah, no, that's actually a beautiful story, and I think
I haven't shared that with many people throughout my life, but I'm growing more and more appreciative, I think, of the mystery of why are we so blessed as humans and have some of us seem to have guardian angels and spirits. I mean, I certainly have done nothing in my life to distinguish myself. I feel so humbled by the love and attention that I know that has saved me on numerous occasions. I've done stupid things as a young man that could have easily ended up in my death.
I mean, we're none of us perfect. That's for sure.
Well,
so the clock is ticking. I'm going to get these last couple questions in.
Okay.
So what does the future of ufology, paranormal investigations look like for
you? Well, I firmly believe that we're headed for a soft disclosure. There's so many mass daylight sightings, and there's so much great technology around that's capturing more and more of these images that, according to the sources that I have, disclosure is going to be forced, whether the U.S. or the other major governments of the world want to disclose it or not. They're going to become more and more visible over more populated areas, and so I think that's the purpose of, say, President Trump's announcement that he's going to create the Space Force, and the DOD's coming public with some of these videos that pilots took of the so-called Tic Tac saucers and so forth.
Right.
I think what's going to happen first to prepare the public eventually for the big disclosure with the big D is that the government will come out and say, okay, we actually have some very advanced technology, and that's what a lot of people are seeing, to calm the population and so forth. It won't be until much later, of course, that they'll have to admit, well, some of this was created with back-engineered technology that we received from A, crash sites, B, other non-human sources. So that, I think, is going to initially dampen a lot of enthusiasm about the ufology, because people will say, why investigate when, they've already said that it's our advanced technology in the skies.
Yeah, it's discouraging, and
it takes away the mystery.
The mystery, which I love about it, but we really do want the answers too.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a great deal more behind that, but I think at the minimum, that's what's going to happen, is that they will have to admit to having advanced technology, which is indeed Trump's Space Force. I think it's been around for at least since the 60s, according to one of my sources.
And they're just slapping a label on it and making it.
And they're slapping a label on it, and now they'll come fess up and come public with it. And I think people will be excited and enthralled because some of it involves technology that is not in common use and will be helpful to mankind. And a lot of the people who, on an amateur basis, become involved in ufology and therefore follow writers such as myself and others, in the ufology field, they'll lose a lot of interest because they just say, well,
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
That's cool. It's our advanced technology, of course.
Right. And on top of that, do you think that the government would sort of create an agency of its own that would supplant ufologists who actually do the research now? Will government agents start taking over that job?
Well, they already have.
Well, okay. Well, all right. Well, that's another topic we'll save for next time. Hashtag
next time.
We'll leave it like that. All right. Cool. Thanks, Ken. I really appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
We'll definitely do it again.
Okay.
And Lena was on recently, and I was telling the story about the yucca plant that you guys had gotten for us. My wife and I really appreciated that. That was awesome.
Did it live?
In someone else's apartment right now? Yes.
It's thriving somewhere else, somewhere unknown.
Yeah, no, it was someone from work. So we handed it over to them because they love plants, and so their entire apartment is just
Well, plants respond to love, so that's fine.
yeah. And well, Elena had reminded me that the name of the plant is called Baby Killer.
Oh, no.
And that could also mean Maya, our cat killer. So we had to find a different home for it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, as long as it's in a loving environment, it should be fine.
All right. Well, cheers, Ken. Thanks, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
All right. Keep the coffee hot and fresh.
All right.